I'm going fishing, says Simon Peter, standing up abruptly, shaking the table in the room where all of the disciples have locked themselves. They've been in the room for a while after the death of Jesus and what seems to be a resurrection of Jesus. And some of the disciples who are also maybe not so sure what to do with themselves say, "We'll go with you. Thanks for the decisiveness, Peter." And so they head out at dark, haul the boat out, put it in the water, put out deeper into the water, and they fish. They fish. They fish. And Peter, in just the barest of moonlight and stars, stares into what is an unfathomably dark sea. And he realizes he doesn't actually want to be fishing. I'm going fishing, says Peter, into the uncertainty of his life. He cannot sit in a room waiting for Jesus to mysteriously show up again. But now he knows he also can't go back to fishing. He has been so changed by the past few years of walking the road with Jesus that he can't go back. I'm going fishing, says Simon, thinking that maybe if he goes back to the boats and the nets, maybe he'll be able to do that again, but it's not who he is anymore. He can't be that fisherman anymore. The idea of fishing and staying in the boat just doesn't seem to have the same kind of meaning. And he realizes as he stares into the dark waters that the nets, they will always be empty. I'm going fishing, said me. I'm pretty sure I've said that before. Whenever life gets slightly uncertain, or I get overly frustrated, things aren't going at the pace I want them to go, or I get confused about who I am or what I'm supposed to be, there is always this kind of rubber band effect in which I think I can go back. I can go back to who I used to be, to the boats I used to be in. The problem with that is that I'm not the same person any longer. And maybe that's true, that Peter presents the pattern. That if you walk through sorrow, or you walk through grief, or you walk a few miles with Jesus, you are not the same. But when life gets difficult or there's some unclarity, there's a tendency to try to go back to who we once were, to try to live into the old patterns of thought or patterns of our heart. And suddenly we realize as we look around us that we can't do it anymore. That those fishing grounds, the nets, they'll just always be empty. All the men on the boat are squinting at the shoreline because some guy is standing there talking to them. And sound travels across water, and so they've heard him say, "Have you caught any fish?" "No, thanks for pointing it out." "Try the right side of the boat." "Okay, fine." So they throw the nets over the right side, and then the whole thing lurches, right? Men and materiel kind of go skidding. And when John recovers, he looks at the shoreline and he looks at Peter and he says, "You know what? It is the Lord." And John stares for a minute before he kind of comes to himself and helps with the hauling. However, Simon Peter just looks at the shoreline and he realizes that he can't tell who it is, but he trusts John, the beloved disciple, that John knows who it is. And if it is Jesus, Peter suddenly realizes he cannot be on the boat one more second. And he's about to dive in when he realizes all his clothes and goods are there. And so he throws his car keys into his pocket and he puts the outer garment on and he jumps into the water. because he's never going back to that boat. He will not get on it again. He realizes that all of who he is has to come with him and go with him to find Jesus on the shoreline. Because if that's Jesus, then that is where Simon Peter knows that his life lies, with Jesus. And it seems to me that when the fishing doesn't work out, when the nets are just empty, the grace of God shows up on the shoreline. I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't recognize Jesus when he shows up in my life. I require somebody else to help me recognize who the Christ is in my midst. But there's Jesus offering a different invitation, right? Hey, have you caught anything? Maybe you'd like to be in a different boat. And the question is, when we realize it's Jesus, are we as ready as Simon Peter to jump out of wherever we are and take all of who we are with us to go to the shoreline, to realize that our truest self, it lies with Jesus? Simon Peter, he feels his arms like starting to not be able to do freestyle any longer, and his legs are beginning to sink. But he does make it to where it's shallow enough and begins to slog toward the shoreline. Can you see him standing there, bedraggled, soaking wet, like heavy cloak kind of pulling him over? And Jesus sits at the fire and looks at him. And Peter looks at Jesus. And there are fish crackling on the fire, and Jesus pokes at the fry bread, and nobody moves. And then the ship comes listing into shore with its 153 fish, and Jesus says to Peter, why don't you get some of that and add that to the breakfast? And Peter only returns to the nets because Jesus sent him. And then they're all gathered around this fire having breakfast. And no one says anything, but no one needs to say anything, because it's enough that Jesus has found them. It's enough that they're sitting around the fire with their beloved. It's sacred, and the silence is meet and right. And it lasts for the duration of the meal until Jesus breaks the silence, talking to Simon. And poor Peter, he's been staring into the fire thinking that the last time he was around a charcoal fire was in the court of the high priest, where he ended up denying Jesus 3 times. And he's still not sure why he did it. Fear, cowardice, confusion, doubt. He doesn't know. But he looks up when Jesus says, Simon Peter, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. And it repeats 3 times. 3 times a lot in this story. 3 denials, 3 resurrection appearances, 3 invitations to tend the sheep. Do you love me more than these, Simon Peter? Then tend my sheep. I know that you are not the fisherman any longer. You are called as a shepherd, because life and Jesus have changed you. And you cannot do what you used to do. And now you will go and build Christian community. This is who you are, Peter, and this is where you're called to go. And it sometimes seems like swimming 100 yards with all your winter clothes on to get to Jesus, doesn't it? That to leave behind the things that we thought would make us who we are, and to become something different and to follow where Christ calls can sometimes feel like a bedraggled slog. But when we finally are in the presence of God, Whether we're standing or we're sitting or we're kneeling or we're singing or we're weeping, something changes. To sit in the presence of the Holy One is to actually find ourselves at home. That we are sustained in that place, we are gathered in that place. And you might even say that that place warms us in the deepest places of ourselves. And it is sitting in silence with God that actually teaches us trust of God, and that helps us figure out not only who God is, but who we are. And then when the time is right, the voice of God says, "Do you love me more than these? Do you love me more than the fear or the expectations that you have of yourself or that other people have of you? Do you love me more than these?" asks Jesus. Do you love me more than who you used to be, so you can find out who you might be in the deepest parts of yourself, asks Jesus. Do you love me more than all the habits of mind and habits of heart and avocation you thought would bring you meaning? Do you love me more than these, that you might find out what you might really be called to do and how you really might change your thinking and your heart habits to be your truest version of yourself? Do you love me more than these, asks Jesus. Because I know who you really are and what you are really called to be and to do. Do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord. You know that I love you. After all of these things, Jesus said to him, "Then follow me."